Tycoon lied to his wife for years about his twins with the ex, until they knocked. Mr. Kim, the board members are waiting. His assistant said from the doorway, bowing slightly. Do-hyun nodded, his expression betraying nothing of the exhaustion that had settled deep in his bones. 3 minutes, he replied, turning back to the panoramic view. The reflection that stared back at him from the glass was perfect. Tailored suit worth more than most people's monthly salary, hair precisely cut and styled, not a single gray strand permitted to show. Perfection was not just preferred in his world. It was required. The markets forgave technical errors eventually, but never weakness. Inside the boardroom, 7 men and 2 women rose as he entered. Do-hyun's steps were measured, unhurried, a predator comfortable in his domain. Gentlemen, ladies, he began, voice steady and commanding. Let's discuss the Busan acquisition. For 2 hours, he led the meeting with surgical precision, slicing through objections, presenting solutions before problems fully materialized. This was the Do-hyun Kim that Seoul's business elite feared and respected. Analytical, 3 steps ahead, emotionally impenetrable. Later that evening, his Bentley glided through the exclusive Hanamdong district, the driver navigating familiar streets leading to the Kim estate. Do-hyun loosened his tie slightly, allowing himself this small reprieve from perfection while hidden behind tinted windows. His phone chimed with a message from Min Seo. Dinner guests arriving at 8. The Jung family, important for the foundation. He closed his eyes briefly. Another performance required. Another evening of flawless smiles and strategic conversation. The car passed through ornate gates, rolling up the curved driveway of a modernist mansion that architectural magazines had featured multiple times. Min Seo was waiting at the entrance, her elegant silhouette framed by the doorway. You're later than expected, she said, her voice gentle despite the observation. At 42, Min Seo Kim Ne Park carried herself with the refined grace of old money, something Do-hyun had studied but could never quite replicate. The Busan deal. Complications, he replied, allowing her to straighten his already straight tie. Her fingers lingered at his collar. You should rest before they arrive. Do-hyun captured her hand, pressing it briefly. These small gestures between them had been learned over time, becoming a language of their own. No time. Tell me about these Youngs again. As they walked through the marbled entryway, Min Seo briefed him on their dinner guests, potential donors for her children's hospital foundation. Do-hyun listened with half his attention, the other half cataloging the immaculate condition of their home. No fingerprints marred the glass tables. No shoes disturbed the foyer. No children's toys cluttered the expansive rooms. You're not listening, Min Seo noted, pausing at the foot of the grand staircase. I am, he countered automatically. Jung Tae-woo, semiconductors, wife interested in pediatric causes. Min Seo's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. And, Do-hyun faltered for a half-second, a lifetime in his world of split-second market decisions. They have 3 children, she supplied, something unreadable crossing her features. Including twins. The word hung in the air between them. Twins. Do-hyun felt a familiar tightness in his chest that had nothing to do with his bespoke jacket. I'll be more present tonight, he promised, reaching for her hand again. For a moment, Min Seo's carefully composed facade seemed to waver, revealing a glimpse of something vulnerable beneath. Will you? Truly present, Do-hyun? The question carried more weight than its simple words suggested. Before he could answer, his phone rang, his executive assistant's distinctive tone. I need to take this, he said, already reaching for the device. Min Seo's hand fell away from his. Of course you do. She turned toward the kitchen, her back straight, shoulders squared. The chef needs instructions anyway. As Do-hyun stepped away to take the call, he caught his reflection in one of the many artfully placed mirrors throughout their home. For a fleeting second, behind the perfect suit and practiced confidence, he glimpsed someone else. A younger man with dreams simpler than corporate acquisitions, with emotions uncomplicated by lies. Then he blinked, and the mirage vanished. Do-hyun paused at the threshold of their living room, still clutching his phone. The Jung family would arrive in less than an hour, but for a moment, the empire could wait. He crossed the room to stand beside his wife, looking at their wedding portrait. Min Seo in traditional hanbok, himself in a Western suit, a perfect blend of old and new Korea, as the society pages had noted at the time. 9 years, he echoed, allowing his hand to rest lightly at the small of her back. Nearly a decade. Min Seo leaned imperceptibly into his touch. Father was so certain it wouldn't last 6 months. Business arrangements rarely make for lasting marriages. He told me the night before. Do-hyun's jaw tightened at the mention of Chairman Park, Min Seo's father, a man who had viewed him as nothing more than an ambitious upstart with convenient market connections. He never thought I was good enough for you. And yet here we are, Min Seo replied, turning to face him. In the soft evening light, she looked younger, more like the woman he'd first met at that charity gala. Reserved but with intelligence burning behind careful words. Who would have thought a marriage negotiated over merger documents would turn into? She trailed off, leaving the sentence unfinished between them. Into what? Do-hyun asked, genuinely curious about how she would define what they had become. Min Seo studied his face for a long moment. Into something real. The simplicity of her words struck him deeply. Something real. In a world where he orchestrated perceptions and manipulated realities daily, the authenticity of what had grown between them remained the one truth he couldn't fully explain and hadn't entirely earned. Do you remember our first real conversation? Min Seo asked, moving toward the bar to pour herself a small glass of wine. Not the formal introduction or the business discussions. Do-hyun nodded, loosening his tie further. The gallery opening. You were standing in front of that abstract painting. Looking completely lost, she finished with a small laugh. And you walked up and said, I don't understand it either, but everyone else seems to, so we should probably nod appreciatively. Do-hyun smiled at the memory. You laughed. It was the first time I'd heard you laugh. I wasn't supposed to marry someone who made me laugh, Min Seo said, handing him a glass of whiskey, his preferred evening drink. I was supposed to marry someone suitable. Father had a list, and I wasn't on it. Not initially. She took a careful sip of her wine. But when Kim Holdings acquired those shipping interests in Busan, suddenly I became acceptable. Do-hyun's voice carried no bitterness. It was simply stating facts. Business was business, after all. Min Seo moved to the sofa, her silk dress whispering against the leather as she sat. We were pragmatic about it. Both of us. Do-hyun joined her, maintaining a small distance that seemed appropriate for their moment of reflection. I needed the Park family connections. You needed freedom, she interjected quietly. Father would only stop arranging matches if I finally selected one. You were the least objectionable option. Such flattery, Do-hyun said with a dry smile. We were honest from the beginning. That's why it worked. She held his gaze. A convenient arrangement with clear terms. Do-hyun felt something twist uncomfortably in his chest. If only that were entirely true. The contracts had been clear, marriage for mutual benefit, but the fine print of his past remained carefully redacted. And then something changed, he said, remembering the gradual shift from formal politeness to genuine care. After your father passed. Min Seo's eyes clouded briefly at the memory. You were unexpectedly kind. Not just present for appearances, but actually there. I didn't anticipate that. You were grieving. Do-hyun remembered those nights when Min Seo's carefully maintained composure had finally broken. How startled he'd been by his own desire to comfort rather than merely accommodate her emotions. And you held me through it without once checking your phone. Min Seo's smile was bittersweet. That's when I started falling in love with my husband. Inconvenient timing. 3 years into a marriage of convenience. The admission hung in the air between them, rarely spoken so plainly. Do-hyun reached for her hand, entwining his fingers with hers. And when did you know? She asked, vulnerability making her voice softer. Or is that asking too much? Do-hyun considered deflecting, his instinctive response to emotional exposure, but something in her eyes made him reconsider. The hospital fundraiser. 4 years ago. The children's wing dedication? Minacio looked surprised. Why then? You were reading to those children. A silly story about a dragon who couldn't breathe fire. His voice grew quieter. One of the little boys fell asleep against your shoulder, and you just kept reading, even though your arm must have been numb. You had this look on your face. He stopped, struggling to articulate what he'd seen that day. What look? Minacio pressed, her fingers tightening around his. Longing, Du-hyun admitted. Pure longing. And I realized I wanted to give you anything you desired. Everything you deserved. Minacio's eyes glistened suddenly. Except the one thing I wanted most. The unspoken truth settled heavily between them. After years of trying, specialists in 3 countries had confirmed what Minacio had begun to suspect. She would never bear children of her own. I'm sorry, Du-hyun said, the words woefully inadequate. If I could change that. But you can't. Minacio composed herself quickly, years of social training reasserting control over momentary emotion. No one can, and we've made peace with it, haven't we? The foundation is our legacy. Du-hyun nodded, though the guilt that clawed at him had nothing to do with their inability to conceive and everything to do with secrets buried in his past. Secrets that now had names, faces, birthdays, though Minacio didn't know it yet. The doorbell chimed, breaking the moment. Minacio stood, smoothing her dress with practiced precision. That will be the Youngs. Early as always. She paused, looking back at him. I'm glad we had this moment, Du-hyun. Sometimes I worry we forget what we've built between the business dinners and social obligations. As she walked toward the foyer, back straight and smile perfectly in place, Du-hyun remained seated for a second longer, fighting the suffocating weight of deception. Their marriage had indeed become something real, something precious, built on a foundation he knew to be deeply flawed. Coming, darling, he called, rising to his feet and reassuming the mantle of Du-hyun Kim, impeccable business titan and devoted husband. They're inseparable, of course, she said, smiling warmly. Everyone told us to put them in different classes growing up, but they simply thrive together. Minacio nodded with perfect interest. That special twin connection is fascinating. They must be so close. Du-hyun's grip tightened imperceptibly on his chopsticks. Twins. The word kept surfacing tonight, prodding at memories he'd locked away years ago. Later, after bidding the Youngs goodbye with promises of follow-up meetings and foundation galas, Du-hyun retreated to his home office. He closed the door softly behind him, loosening his tie completely now and pouring himself another whiskey. Stronger this time, without ice. The rain that had threatened all evening finally arrived, drumming against the windows with increasing intensity. Du-hyun stood watching the droplets race down the glass, each one creating its own chaotic path. The weather matched his mood, darkening, turbulent. His hand moved almost unconsciously to the hidden panel in his desk, a security feature that had proven useful for storing sensitive business documents. Tonight, however, he wasn't reaching for corporate secrets. His fingers found the small key and unlocked the hidden drawer beneath his main files. Inside lay a single envelope, edges softened by time though rarely handled. He removed it with the care one might give a volatile explosive, carrying it to his leather chair before extracting its contents. The photograph was slightly faded now. A young woman with defiant eyes and an unrestrained smile, her dark hair caught by wind as she looked toward the camera with a mixture of exasperation and affection. June. The name he hadn't permitted himself to speak aloud in nearly 2 decades. You always hated having your picture taken, he murmured to the image, allowing himself to be pulled back through the years to when he was simply Du-hyun. Not yet the empire builder, just an ambitious young man with dreams larger than his bank account. 18 years earlier, you're taking my picture again? June scowled, though her eyes betrayed her amusement. I'm covered in paint. I look terrible. Du-hyun lowered the camera, a luxury he could barely afford, and grinned. You never look terrible. The blue paint on your cheek actually suits you. Liar, she said, but crossed the cramped studio apartment to kiss him anyway, leaving a small smudge of blue on his crisp white shirt. "Now you match." He looked down at the stain with mock horror. "My only decent shirt for tomorrow's interview." Jiun's expression shifted immediately to concern. "Oh no, I'm sorry. I forgot about the interview." Do-hyun cut her worry short with a laugh, pulling her closer despite the wet paint on her hands. "Worth it?" he murmured against her hair. "It's just a shirt." "It's not just a shirt," she protested, trying to pull away to assess the damage. "It's your chance with Park Investments. This is the opportunity you've been waiting for." Do-hyun shrugged with a confidence he only partly felt. "They'll hire me for my ideas, not my shirt." Jiun shook her head, but her smile returned. "Your arrogance is either going to make you wildly successful or completely unemployable. There's no in-between with you. That's why you love me," he said, the words still new enough between them to carry weight. Jiun's expression softened. "That's one of many reasons." She turned back to the large canvas dominating the small space. "Now let me finish this commission before tomorrow's deadline, or we won't make rent again." Do-hyun watched her work, this wildfire of a woman who'd crashed into his life at a university art exhibition where he'd gone solely to network with potential investors. Instead of business cards, he'd left with her phone number scribbled on a napkin and a promise to show him art that doesn't bore you to tears. She was everything his ambitions warned him against. Unpredictable, unconcerned with appearances, fiercely independent, and completely unimpressed by the business empire he intended to build. Yet in 6 months, she'd become the center of a life he hadn't planned but couldn't imagine relinquishing. "Move in with me," he said suddenly. Jiun's brush paused mid-stroke. "What? Move in with me? This place is too small for your work. My apartment has better light, and you wouldn't have to worry about rent." She turned slowly, her expression guarded. "Do-hyun, we've talked about this. I know what you said before. You value your independence. You don't want to rely on anyone." He crossed to her, careful not to disturb her workspace. "But this is practical. You could save money, focus on your art instead of commercial commissions." "I don't want to be kept," Jiun interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "Not even by you." "That's not what I'm suggesting," Do-hyun protested. "Isn't it?" She set her brush down. "You want to take care of things. It's who you are. But I need to make my own way." Do-hyun felt frustration rising. "You're being stubborn. This isn't about pride." "It is exactly about pride," she countered. "Mine. I won't be another acquisition in your portfolio." Do-hyun. The words stung more than he expected. "That's unfair. I've never treated you like that." Jiun's expression softened. She reached for his hand, paint-stained fingers entwining with his clean ones. "Not intentionally, but I see how your mind works. You collect potential companies to invest in, people who might be useful someday. You're building something impressive, Do-hyun. But I won't be a piece in your perfect life puzzle." "You're more than that," he insisted. "You know you are." "Am I?" Her question hung between them. "When you imagine your future, that empire you're determined to build, where do I fit?" Do-hyun hesitated a moment too long. Jiun nodded slowly, a sad smile playing at her lips. "That's what I thought. You haven't figured that part out yet." 3 months later, "I got the position," Do-hyun announced, standing in Jiun's doorway with a bottle of champagne he definitely couldn't afford. "Junior investment analyst at Park Holdings." Jiun squealed with delight, throwing her arms around him. "I knew you would. Mr. Perfect interview suit couldn't fail." Her enthusiasm warmed him, pushing away the lingering doubts about what he'd agreed to in the final interview. Old Man Park had been very clear about his expectations regarding dedication and image. "Let's celebrate," he said, producing 2 mismatched mugs since Jiun didn't own proper champagne flutes. "To new beginnings." Something flashed in her eyes, hesitation, perhaps, but she took the offered mug. "To new beginnings," she echoed. They drank, and Do-hyun pulled her close. "I've been thinking about what you asked, about where you fit in my future." Jiun tensed slightly in his arms. "And everywhere," he said simply. You fit everywhere. Whatever I build, it means nothing without you in it. Her eyes searched his. You mean that? I do. He kissed her softly. I love you, June. The empire can wait. 2 weeks later, you can't be serious, June said, her voice dangerously quiet as she stood in his apartment, arms crossed defensively across her chest. You're breaking up with me because your boss suggested it? Chairman Park didn't suggest anything, Do-hyun corrected, maintaining distance between them. He made it clear that my position comes with expectations. The company has a certain image, and I don't fit it, she finished for him. The struggling artist from the wrong side of Seoul doesn't match the Park Holdings aesthetic. Do-hyun ran a hand through his hair, frustration mounting. This is business, Jiun. I've worked my entire life for this opportunity. Business? She repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. The empire can wait, you said. That lasted, 15 days? I didn't expect Chairman Park to take such a personal interest in my development, Do-hyun explained, hating how corporate he sounded. He's introducing me to the right people, mentoring me personally, and isolating you from the wrong people, Jiun cut in. Meaning me. Later that night, after their guests had departed and Minaseo had retired to bed, Do-hyun stood alone in his study, glass of whiskey untouched as he gazed at the rain streaking the windows. The house was quiet except for the gentle tapping of water against glass, a rhythm that pulled him inexorably back through time. It had been raining like this 19 years ago. You're leaving, aren't you? Jiun had asked, her voice unervingly calm as she stood in the doorway of her cramped studio apartment. Paint smudged her oversized t-shirt, cobalt blue and crimson streaks like fresh wounds against the fabric. Do-hyun, then still Hyun-ki, before he'd reinvented himself with a more prestigious-sounding name, had continued packing his meager belongings into a duffel bag. The investment came through, he'd said, avoiding her eyes. I need to be in Seoul by morning. And when were you going to tell me? Her voice had remained steady, making it worse somehow. Anger he could have weathered. This quiet resignation cut deeper. I'm telling you now. June had laughed then, a hollow sound nothing like her usual warm chuckle. After 3 years together, I find out you're leaving as you're walking out the door. He zipped the bag closed with a final, decisive sound. This opportunity won't come again, Jiun. Park Investments never takes chances on outsiders. And I'm what? An anchor? A liability? She'd stepped further into the room, arms crossed. The afternoon light filtering through the rain-streaked windows had caught the silver pendant at her throat. The first gift he'd given her, purchased when they could barely afford rent. You're an artist, he'd said, as though it explained everything. Your world is here in Busan. Mine is wherever money takes you. She'd finished his sentence with such precision that he'd finally looked up, meeting her gaze. Her dark eyes had always seen through him, from the first moment they'd met at the university coffee shop where she worked between classes. That's unfair. His voice had lacked conviction. Is it? She'd moved to the window, looking out at the rain-soaked city. When we met, you talked about changing the system from within. Remember? Building companies that valued people over profit. A sad smile had played at her lips. Now you're willing to become what you despised for a seat at their table. I was naive then. Dreams don't pay bills, June. Neither does betraying yourself. She turned back to him, rain-diffused light casting shadows across her face. Or those who love you. Do-hyun had felt something fracture inside him. Something essential and irreplaceable. But ambition had already taken root, strangling vulnerability like an invasive vine. Park Sung-ho is offering me a position managing actual acquisitions. Real responsibility. In 5 years, I could be happy? She challenged. Will you be happy, Hyun-ki? He'd hefted his bag onto his shoulder. I'll be successful. They aren't the same thing. June had moved then, blocking his path to the door. Not to stop him, he realized, but to ensure he couldn't leave without truly seeing her one last time. At least have the courage to admit what this is really about. And what's that? He'd asked, tension tightening his voice. I'm not the right kind of woman for where you're going. No accusation in her tone, just simple truth. No connections, no wealthy family. Just paint-stained hands and student loans. He hadn't denied it. That had been the cruelest part. His silence confirming what she already knew. Ji-yoon had reached up then, her fingers brushing his cheek with unbearable gentleness. I hope you find what you're looking for. I really do. Then she'd stepped aside, clearing his path to the door and the future he'd chosen. Do-hyun had paused at the threshold, some desperate part of him wanting to turn back, to stay in this small apartment filled with canvases and dreams and unconditional love. But ambition had already hardened around his heart. Goodbye, Ji-yoon. The rain had soaked him as he'd walked away, not looking back even once, terrified that if he did, his resolve would crumble like sand. Now, 19 years later, Do-hyun placed his untouched whiskey on the desk and sank into his leather chair. He opened the bottom drawer, the one with a hidden compartment that not even Minacio knew about, and extracted a small, worn envelope. From it, he carefully removed a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age but preserved with obsessive care. The headline read, "Emerging artist Ji-yoon Moon captivates critics with solo exhibition." The accompanying photo showed her standing proudly beside one of her massive abstract canvases, her smile radiant. The article was dated 16 years ago, 3 years after he'd walked away. Do-hyun had tracked her career from afar, collecting these small snippets of her life while building his empire. A successful exhibition in Busan, a residency in Tokyo, a teaching position at the Arts University. Then, 5 years ago, the articles had stopped. Ji-yoon Moon had vanished from the art world without explanation, her promising career seemingly abandoned. Do-hyun had considered, briefly, selfishly, reaching out, before convincing himself it would be cruel to reappear in her life after so long. What he'd never found in any of those carefully collected articles was any mention of children, of twins, of the secret that would eventually come knocking at his door. His phone vibrated on the desk, pulling him from his memories. An unknown number. Do-hyun rarely answered calls from numbers he didn't recognize, but something, perhaps the ghosts of the past still lingering in his mind, made him pick up. "Kim speaking," he said, his voice betraying nothing of his inner turmoil. There was a moment of silence, then a young woman's voice, hesitant but determined. "Mr. Kim Do-hyun? My name is Soo-jin Moon. I believe you knew my mother, Ji-yoon Moon." Do-hyun's hand tightened around the phone. The past, it seemed, had finally found him. "I'm afraid, my brother, and I need to speak with you," the voice continued, growing stronger with each word. "It's about our mother. She's very ill, and, well, there are things you should know." "I don't understand," Do-hyun said, though a terrible understanding was already dawning. "What things?" The pause that followed seemed to stretch for eternity before Soo-jin spoke again, her words shattering the carefully constructed reality of Do-hyun's perfect life. "That you're our father, and we need your help." Do-hyun stared at the rain-streaked windows, the newspaper clipping trembling in his hand, as 18 years of secrets began to unravel with a single phone call. In a small, sparsely furnished apartment across the city, Soo-jin Moon lowered her phone, hands shaking as she looked across the room at her twin brother. Soo-min sat perched on the edge of a worn sofa, his expression a mirror of her own tension. "Well?" he asked, leaning forward. "Did you reach him?" Soo-jin nodded, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear, a nervous habit she'd inherited from their mother. "He didn't hang up. That's something, I guess." "Did he sound surprised?" Soo-min's voice carried an edge of bitterness. "Or has he known about us all along?" "Surprised," she confirmed, sinking down beside her brother. "Definitely shocked. His voice completely changed when I said we're his children." The twins fell silent, identical dark eyes looking toward the hallway that led to their mother's bedroom. The small apartment was meticulously neat despite their limited means, another habit from their mother, who believed in finding dignity even in difficult circumstances. "The doctor called while you were on the phone," Soo-min said finally, his voice lowered. "The experimental treatment costs even more than they initially quoted." Su-jin closed her eyes briefly, exhaustion washing over her features. At 18, she looked older. Responsibility and worry had etched premature lines around her eyes. How much more? Another 30 million won. That's impossible, she whispered, despair threatening to overwhelm her carefully maintained composure. We're already working double shifts. The university said they'll hold our scholarships, but if we miss another semester, we'll figure it out, Sumin insisted, taking his sister's hand. Despite being twins, he had appointed himself her protector since childhood. If he won't help us, we'll find another way. And if he does help? Su-jin asked. What then? Sumin's jaw tightened. Then we take what Mom needs and walk away. We don't owe him anything. A soft sound from the hallway made both twins turn. Ji-moon stood in the doorway, leaning heavily against the frame. At 43, she remained beautiful despite the illness that had ravaged her body. Her eyes still bright with the same intensity that had once captivated galleries across Asia. Mom! Su-jin rushed to support her. You should be resting. Ji-eun allowed herself to be guided to the sofa but shook her head weakly. I heard you talking. You called him, didn't you? The twins exchanged glances, a silent communication honed over a lifetime. We had to, Mom, Sumin said gently. The treatment is too expensive? Ji-eun finished, her voice stronger than her frail body suggested. I've told you both. I'm at peace with whatever happens. Well, we're not, Su-jin said firmly, kneeling before her mother. We're not ready to lose you, and he owes us this much at least. Ji-eun looked at her children. These miraculous beings who had been her entire world for 18 years, who carried shadows of their father in the set of their jaws and the determined gleam in their eyes. I never told him about you, she said softly. That was my choice, my pride. He abandoned you, Sumin countered, the ever-present anger flickering in his voice. Left you without a backward glance to chase wealth and status. Life is rarely that simple, my love. Ji-eun reached out to touch her son's face. I could have told him. I chose not to. Whatever he became after he left us, it doesn't erase the man I once loved. The man you loved is now one of the richest businessmen in Korea, Su-jin said, a hint of irony coloring her words. While we can barely afford your medications. Ji-eun looked toward the small shelf where family photos stood. Among them was a faded picture of herself as a young woman, paint-splattered and laughing, standing beside a serious young man whose ambitious eyes betrayed no hint of the tycoon he would become. What did he say when you told him? She asked, her voice carefully neutral. Su-jin hesitated before answering. He wants to meet us, tomorrow, at his office. Ji-eun nodded slowly, as though this was exactly what she had expected. Then you should go. Both of you. Not without you, Sumin insisted. Yes, without me. Ji-eun's tone brooked no argument. This first meeting should be between a father and his children, without the complication of past love. The twins watched as their mother's eyes drifted to the window, where rain continued to fall in sheets across the city. The same rain that had fallen the day their father walked away, never knowing what he was leaving behind. Besides, Ji-eun added with a shadow of her old spirit, I'd rather not meet the great Do-hyun Kim looking like this. She gestured to her thin frame with a self-deprecating smile. A woman has her pride, after all. As Ji-eun's frail laughter filled the small apartment, the twins exchanged another glance, this one filled with determination. Tomorrow they would come face to face with the father who had never known them, whose blood ran in their veins but whose life had continued without them for 18 years. He hadn't slept. After the call, he'd spent the night in his study, telling Minasio he needed to prepare for an unexpected meeting. Not a lie, technically, though the enormity of the omission felt like a physical weight pressing down on his chest. The elevator doors opened silently onto the executive floor where his assistant, Park Ji-ho, waited with military precision. The board members are assembled in conference room 3 for the quarterly review, Ji-ho reported, falling into step beside him. And the representatives from Singapore arrived early. They're waiting in the west reception area. Do-hyun nodded absently, his focus elsewhere. Sir, Jiho ventured, noting his employer's unusual distraction. Is everything all right? I'll be receiving 2 visitors at 11, Do-hyun said, ignoring the question. They aren't on the schedule. When they arrive, bring them directly to my private office. Jiho's eyebrows rose fractionally, the closest he ever came to showing surprise. In 5 years, no one had ever been brought to Do-hyun's private office without prior vetting and scheduling. Names for security clearance, sir? Do-hyun hesitated almost imperceptibly. Moon, Soo-jin and Soo-min Moon. Understood. And the board meeting. I'll join them now. Excuse me if I need to leave early. Of course, sir. Jiho made a note on his tablet, his face revealing nothing. Min Seo called. She wanted to confirm your attendance at the Foundation Gala tonight. Do-hyun's step faltered slightly. The Kim Foundation's annual education gala, one of Min Seo's most important events. Media would be present. Donors, politicians. The perfect, charitable image of the Kim family on full display. Confirm it, he said, straightening his already immaculate tie. The morning passed in a blur of projections, presentations, and strategic discussions. Do-hyun participated with mechanical efficiency, his mind automatically processing spreadsheets and market analyses while a deeper part of his consciousness grappled with the impending meeting. At precisely 10:58, his phone vibrated with a message from security. They're here. Do-hyun rose abruptly, interrupting the CFO's presentation. Gentlemen, continue without me. An urgent matter requires my attention. Smooth, professional nods followed him from the room, the board accustomed to the unpredictable demands of global business. No one questioned the sudden departure of the man whose vision had transformed a modest trading company into a multinational conglomerate. No one except Do-hyun himself, who questioned everything as he walked the long corridor to his private office. Through the glass walls separating the executive wing from the reception area, he caught his first glimpse of them. 2 slender figures seated rigidly on the modern sofa, their youth startling against the backdrop of corporate power. Even from a distance, the resemblance was undeniable. Do-hyun paused, one hand on his office door, suddenly overwhelmed by the reality of what awaited him. In all his meticulous life planning, he had never prepared for this moment. Jiho appeared at his side. Shall I bring them in, sir? Do-hyun nodded, unable to trust his voice. Minutes later, the door opened again, and Jiho ushered in the twins. Mr. Moon and Miss Moon to see you, sir. They entered cautiously, like creatures walking into unknown territory, alert, defensive, assessing. The girl, Soo-jin, led slightly, her chin raised in a gesture so reminiscent of Ji-yoon that Do-hyun felt a physical jolt of recognition. The boy hung half a step behind, his posture protective, eyes narrowed with suspicion. Please sit, Do-hyun said, gesturing to the chairs before his desk while struggling to keep his voice steady. They remained standing. We'll be brief, Soo-jin said. Despite her youth, her voice carried a certain authority. We understand you're busy. You look like her, Do-hyun said, the words escaping before he could filter them. Your mother. Something flickered across Soo-jin's face. Surprise, perhaps, that he would acknowledge the connection so readily. Everyone says I look more like you, Soo-min countered, his tone challenging, especially around the eyes. Now that they stood before him in his office's unforgiving light, Do-hyun couldn't deny it. The boy's eyes were Ji-yoon's in shape, but the intensity, the particular way his gaze calculated and assessed, that was unmistakably his own. Please, Do-hyun said again, more firmly this time. Sit. Whatever has brought you here clearly matters enough to warrant more than a standing conversation. After a moment's hesitation, the twins seated, themselves with identical movements that spoke of their shared DNA. Do-hyun remained standing, needing the psychological advantage of height as his world tilted on its axis. How is your mother? He asked, genuine concern mixing with his need to postpone the inevitable confrontation. Dying? Soo-min said bluntly, the single word landing like a physical blow. Do-hyun gripped the edge of his desk. What? Stage 4 cancer. Soo-jin elaborated, her voice softer than her brother's but no less direct. Diagnosed 9 months ago. Standard treatments failed. There's an experimental protocol, Soo-min continued, at Seoul National University Hospital. 70% success rate in similar cases. But it costs money we don't have, Soo-jin finished. Do-hyun sank slowly into his chair, the perfectly ordered universe he'd constructed suddenly spinning out of control. Jiun is dying, he repeated, the words feeling foreign in his mouth. Mom doesn't know we're here, Soo-jin said, leaning forward slightly. She'd be furious if she knew. She's never asked anyone for help, especially not you. But we're not her, Soo-min added. We don't share her pride or her forgiveness. Forgiveness, Do-hyun echoed, confused. She forgave you years ago for walking out, Soo-jin explained. She never spoke badly of you, even when we asked about our father. Just said you had different paths to follow. The simple dignity of Jiun's response hit Do-hyun harder than any recrimination could have. How like her, to find the generous interpretation even in abandonment. Why didn't she tell me? He asked, the question directed more at himself than at them. About you. Why didn't she tell me she was pregnant? Soo-min scoffed. Would it have mattered? You made your choice clear. I had a right to know, Do-hyun insisted, a flash of anger cutting through his shock. Rights. Soo-min half rose from his chair, but his sister's hand on his arm restrained him. We didn't come here to debate the past, Soo-jin said firmly. We came because Mom needs that treatment, and we've exhausted every other option. Do-hyun studied them. These children with his blood and Jiun's spirit. 18 years. He had missed 18 years. How much? He asked finally. 120 million won, Soo-min stated, plus ongoing care costs. A staggering sum for most families. A rounding error in Do-hyun's personal accounts. Of course I'll cover it, he said immediately. I'll have my assistant arrange direct payment to the hospital today. And any other expenses, housing closer to the treatment center, home care, specialists, anything she needs. The twins exchanged glances, clearly surprised by the lack of hesitation. Just like that? Soo-min asked suspiciously. She's the mother of my children, Do-hyun said, the words strange yet undeniable. And you? He stopped, overtaken by the enormity of the situation. These were his children, his son and daughter, living, breathing evidence of the life he might have had. We should go, Soo-jin said abruptly, standing. We've said what we came to say. Wait. Do-hyun rose as well, panic suddenly gripping him at the thought of them walking out. Please, there's so much we need to discuss. We need your financial help, Soo-min clarified coldly. Not a relationship. Do-hyun felt the barb land but pressed on. At least tell me about yourselves, your studies, your plans. A moment of uncertainty passed between the twins before Soo-jin answered. We're both on scholarship at Seoul National. I'm studying architecture. Soo-min is in the music program. Music? Do-hyun couldn't mask his surprise as he looked at his son. Piano and composition, Soo-min admitted reluctantly. Not that it matters to you. It does matter, Do-hyun insisted. Everything about you matters. The sincerity in his voice seemed to unnerve them more than hostility would have. They had clearly prepared for rejection or negotiation, not for immediate acceptance and apparent interest. The office door opened suddenly, without the customary knock. Minaseo entered, elegant as always in a tailored suit, her smile freezing as she registered the presence of strangers. Do-hyun, I apologize for interrupting. Ji-ho said you were in a private meeting, but the foundation called about tonight's seating arrangements and... She stopped, her social training kicking in as she extended a hand to the visitors. I'm Minaseo Kim, Do-hyun's wife. The silence that followed was deafening. Soo-jin recovered first, taking Minaseo's outstretched hand with impeccable manners. Soo-jin Moon, this is my brother, Soo-min. We're business associates of your husband. Do-hyun felt his chest constrict at the obvious lie, and at the unavoidable confrontation now looming. Minasio's shrewd eyes moved between the twins and her husband, clearly noting the resemblance that suddenly seemed glaringly obvious. "How interesting," Minacio said, her voice perfectly controlled. "Do-hyun rarely meets with business associates in his private office. It's a rather unique situation," Do-hyun managed, desperately trying to formulate a plan. This was not how Minacio should discover the truth. Not like this, blindsided in front of strangers. "Clearly," Minacio agreed, her smile not reaching her eyes. "I won't intrude further. A pleasure meeting you both." With a precise nod, she withdrew, closing the door behind her with a soft click that somehow sounded more final than a slam. "That's your wife," Sumin stated flatly when she had gone. "Yes." Do-hyun ran a hand over his face, aging years in moments. "Does she know about us?" Sujin asked. "No one knows about you," Do-hyun admitted. "Until yesterday, not even I knew." The twins exchanged another look, one of those silent communications that only they understood. "We should leave," Sujin decided, gathering her bag. "We've disrupted enough." "Please," Do-hyun said again, moving around his desk to stand directly before them. "Don't disappear. Let me help, not just with the medical bills. We've managed for 18 years without you," Sumin pointed out, but there was less edge in his voice now. "I'll have the funds transferred today," Do-hyun promised. "But I'd like to meet with you again. And I'd like to see Jiun." The twins hesitated, indecision clear on their young faces. Finally, Sujin removed a small notebook from her bag, wrote something on a page, and tore it out. "Our address and phone numbers," she said, handing him the paper. "Mom has treatment on Tuesdays and Thursdays. She's strongest in the mornings." Do-hyun accepted the paper with reverence, as though it contained something precious rather than simple contact information. "Thank you," he said, unable to articulate the emotions churning within him. As they turned to leave, Sumin paused at the door. "You won't tell anyone about us, will you? We didn't come here to wreck your perfect life or embarrass you." The question cut deeper than the young man could possibly know. "You are not an embarrassment," Do-hyun said firmly. "You are my children, and while I need time to figure out how to handle this situation properly, I will never deny you." Something in his tone, perhaps the first note of genuine fatherly protection either of them had ever heard from him, made both twins look at him with new uncertainty. They left without another word, escorted by Jiho back to the elevator bank. Through the glass walls, Do-hyun watched them go, straight-backed and proud despite the burden they carried. Jiun had raised them well. The immediate crisis addressed, his mind turned to the storm awaiting him at home. Minacio was many things. Patient, gracious, sophisticated, but she was not a fool. She had seen the resemblance. She would have questions. And for the first time in their marriage, Do-hyun would have no choice but to answer with complete honesty, regardless of the consequences. His phone buzzed with a message from Minacio. "I've gone home early. We need to talk. Tonight." Do-hyun stared at the screen, then at the paper in his hand with the twins' information. In the space of 24 hours, the carefully compartmentalized sections of his life had collapsed into one another like a house of cards in a sudden wind. 3 days had passed since the twins' visit to his office. 3 days since Minacio had walked out of their home with a single suitcase, her parting words still echoing in his ears. "I don't know who you are anymore. Perhaps I never did." Jiho approached from the nurse's station, holding a paper cup of coffee. "Sir, they're expecting you." Do-hyun nodded, accepting the coffee but making no move to drink it. "How is she today?" "Stable, according to the nurses. The first round of the new treatment went well yesterday. The oncologist seems cautiously optimistic." Of course Jiho would have gathered this intelligence. Do-hyun had sent him ahead partly for this purpose, to assess the situation, to prepare the ground, but also, if he was honest with himself, to delay this moment. "They know you're coming," Jiho added gently. Sujin called down to confirm you'd arrived. Do-hyun handed the untouched coffee back to his assistant. Wait here. He walked the remaining distance with measured steps, knocked once, and opened the door before his courage could fail him. The hospital room was larger than standard, a private suite he had arranged, with floor-to-ceiling windows along one wall. Rain streaked down the glass, creating shifting patterns of light across the bed where Ji-yoon sat propped against pillows, a book open in her lap. She looked up, and 19 years collapsed into nothing. Do-hyun, she said simply, closing her book. She was thinner than he remembered, much thinner, her once rounded cheeks now angular, highlighting the delicate bone structure he had always admired. Her long hair was gone, replaced by a short, stylish cut that somehow made her look both younger and infinitely more vulnerable. But her eyes, those expressive eyes that had once looked at him with such adoration, remained unchanged, watching him now with calm curiosity. Ji-yoon, he managed, his throat suddenly dry. You look well. A hint of her old smile flickered across her face. Always the diplomat. I look terrible, but thank you for the courtesy. Mom! Soo-jin chided from her position by the window. Don't start. Do-hyun hadn't immediately registered the twins' presence. So focused had he been on their mother. They stood together near the window, Soo-jin perched on the wide sill, Soo-min leaning against the wall beside her, arms crossed defensively. It's all right, Ji-yoon assured her daughter. Do-hyun and I know each other well enough to dispense with pleasantries. She gestured to the chair beside her bed. Please sit. You're making the room feel cramped by hovering in the doorway. He moved forward mechanically, settling into the chair with uncharacteristic awkwardness. Up close, he could see the toll the illness had taken, the slight yellowish cast to her skin, the prominence of veins in her hands, the careful way she regulated her breathing. The children told me what they did, Ji-yoon said without preamble. Going to your office like that, I want to apologize. Don't, Do-hyun said immediately. They did what they thought necessary to help you. I respect that. Still, to surprise you that way, after all this time, she shook her head slightly. It must have been quite a shock. Do-hyun glanced toward the twins, who watched the exchange with matching expressions of wary assessment. It was unexpected, he acknowledged, but not unwelcome. You don't need to say that, Soo-min interjected, his voice tight. We know this complicates your life. Soo-min, Ji-yoon said softly, a gentle reproof in her tone. It's fine, Do-hyun assured her, turning back to face his son. You're right, this does complicate my life. But complications aren't always unwelcome. He paused, choosing his words carefully. Sometimes they reveal what truly matters. An uncomfortable silence settled over the room, broken only by the steady beeping of the monitoring equipment and the persistent rhythm of rain against glass. How are you feeling? Do-hyun asked finally, returning his attention to Ji-yoon. The doctors say the new treatment protocol shows promise. Better than yesterday, she answered honestly. Worse than last month, but hopeful. She adjusted her position slightly, wincing. They tell me the next few treatments will determine how effective this approach will be. Is there anything else you need? Anything I can do? Ji-yoon's gaze softened slightly. You've done more than enough already, Do-hyun. The twins told me about the financial arrangements, the private room, the specialists you've consulted. It's nothing, he insisted. I only wish. He trailed off, unable to complete the thought aloud. Wished you'd known sooner, Ji-yoon suggested, finishing for him. Would it have made a difference? The question hung in the air between them, laden with 19 years of unspoken history. Yes, Do-hyun said firmly. It would have made all the difference. Dad, Soo-jin said, the first time either twin had addressed him this way. Could we have a few minutes? There's a cafe downstairs. Do-hyun looked to Ji-yoon, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Go ahead, she said. Soo-min will stay with me. He followed Soo-jin through the hospital corridors to a small cafe on the ground floor. The rain had intensified, drumming against the windows and creating a cocoon of white noise around the handful of occupied tables. Coffee? He offered, gesturing toward the counter. Tea, please. Jasmine, if they have it. They settled at a corner table with their drinks, the awkwardness between them palpable. Your mother seems strong, Do-hyun ventured, wrapping his hands around his cup. Soo-jin nodded. She always has been. Even when... She stopped, reconsidering her words. The doctors say her resilience is remarkable. Most patients with her diagnosis wouldn't have survived this long without treatment. Why did she wait? Do-hyun couldn't keep the note of frustration from his voice. If she had sought treatment sooner... We don't have your resources, Soo-jin interrupted, a hint of her brother's defensiveness emerging. Mom worked 3 jobs to put us through school. Medical insurance only covers so much. By the time she admitted something was wrong, she shrugged, the simple gesture conveying volumes. Do-hyun felt the familiar weight of guilt settle more firmly on his shoulders. I'm sorry. I should have realized. That's not why I wanted to talk to you, Soo-jin said, straightening her shoulders. I wanted to ask about your wife. The abrupt change of subject caught him off guard. Min Seo, Sumin and I never intended to cause problems in your marriage. We just needed help for Mom. The genuine concern in her voice, concern for a woman she'd met only briefly, touched something in Do-hyun. The problems in my marriage are not your fault, he said carefully. Min Seo and we've built something valuable together, but it was founded on omissions. That's my responsibility, not yours. Where is she now? Staying with her sister. She needed time to process everything. Soo-jin nodded thoughtfully, cradling her tea. Will she forgive you? The directness of the question, so like Ji-yoon's unflinching honesty, made Do-hyun pause. I don't know, he admitted. I hope so, but forgiveness isn't simple. No, Soo-jin agreed softly. It isn't. They sat in silence for a moment, the rain creating a soothing backdrop to their conversation. Do you regret it? Soo-jin asked suddenly, his eyes, he realized with a jolt, fixed intently on his face. Leaving Mom all those years ago? The question he had been asking himself constantly since the twins had appeared in his office. I regret not knowing about you and your brother, he answered carefully. I regret missing your childhood, your milestones. But the decision itself, he sighed, struggling to articulate the complex reality. At the time, it seemed the only path forward. My father had just died. The company was collapsing. The merger with Min Seo's family's corporation was the only way to save thousands of jobs. So it was all business? Soo-jin pressed, a hint of disappointment coloring her tone. No, Do-hyun said firmly. Not just business. Your mother and we were very young. Our relationship was intense, beautiful, but also unstable. We wanted different things. She was an artist who valued freedom above all else. I was determined to fulfill my father's legacy. And now, Soo-jin asked, what do you want now? Do-hyun looked into his daughter's searching eyes and found he couldn't dissemble. To know my children, to help Ji-yoon recover, to find a way forward that doesn't destroy everything I've built, but doesn't deny what matters most. Soo-jin studied him for a long moment, then nodded as if she'd reached some internal conclusion. Mom kept every newspaper article about you, she said quietly. Every magazine feature, every television interview. She followed your career from the beginning, even when it hurt to see you with someone else. The revelation felt like a physical blow. She never remarried? There were men who were interested, Soo-jin said with a small shrug. But she always said she'd had her great love story. Everything else would be settling. Do-hyun stared into his cooling coffee, overwhelmed by the implications. All these years, while he had deliberately avoided any news of Ji-yoon, she had been watching him from afar, witnessing his rise to prominence, his marriage, his public life, all while raising his children alone. She doesn't know I'm telling you this, Soo-jin continued. She'd probably be angry if she knew, but I thought you should understand. None of this is simple. Not for any of us. Thank you, Do-hyun said, meeting his daughter's gaze, for telling me, for coming to my office that day, for giving me a chance to know you both. Sujin's expression softened slightly. We should get back. Mom tires easily. When they returned to the hospital room, they found Jiyoon sleeping peacefully, Sumin sitting beside her bed with headphones on, long fingers moving slightly as if playing an invisible piano. Practicing even here, Do-hyun realized. Sumin looked up as they entered, removing his headphones. The nurse gave her something for pain, he explained in a hushed voice. She'll probably sleep for a few hours. Do-hyun moved to stand beside the bed, looking down at Jiyoon's sleeping face. Even in illness, even after all these years, there was something about her that called to him. Some essential quality that had captured his heart when they were both barely more than children. I should go, he said reluctantly, turning to the twins. Let her rest. But I'll be back tomorrow if that's all right. Sumin looked like he might object, but Sujin placed a hand on her brother's shoulder. That would be fine, she answered for both of them. The doctor usually visits around 10. Do-hyun nodded, pulling a business card from his pocket. My private number, he said, handing it to Sumin. Day or night, if anything changes, if you need anything at all, call me immediately. Sumin accepted the card with obvious reluctance but nodded his acknowledgement. At the door, Do-hyun paused for one last look at the tableau. His sleeping first love, his newly discovered children standing protectively at her bedside, before stepping back into the hospital corridor where Ji-ho waited with patient efficiency. Sir? His assistant inquired, noting Do-hyun's troubled expression. We have arrangements to make, Do-hyun said as they walked toward the elevator. Contact my personal attorney. I want to establish trust funds for Sujin and Sumin, substantial ones, and find out what universities they're considering for graduate studies. Make sure applications and recommendations are in order. Of course, sir. And the foundation gala next week. Do-hyun had almost forgotten. The annual Kim Foundation Education Gala, Min-seo's pride and joy, the culmination of months of planning. He had never missed one in 9 years of marriage. I'll be there, he confirmed, stepping into the waiting elevator. And Ji-ho, find out everything you can about experimental cancer treatments. Worldwide, cost is no object. As the elevator doors closed, Do-hyun caught a glimpse of his reflection in the polished metal. A successful man in an expensive suit, every hair in place, every crease perfect. The image of control and success he had spent 2 decades cultivating. Yet inside, he felt anything but controlled. For the first time since his father's death had thrust him into leadership at 23, Do-hyun Kim had no clear strategy, no 5-year plan, no carefully plotted path forward. He only knew that nothing would ever be the same again. Outside the hospital, the rain had stopped, leaving the city glistening under breaking clouds. His driver held the car door open, the familiar luxury of the back seat waiting to receive him. But before entering, Do-hyun paused, looking back up at the building, at the window he knew belonged to room 418. From this distance, he could just make out 2 figures standing there, looking down at him. His children. Do-hyun adjusted his bow tie before the mirror in the hotel's private preparation suite, his movements mechanical. A week had passed since his first visit to Ji-yoon's hospital room. A week of daily visits, awkward conversations with the twins, and increasingly promising medical reports. The experimental treatment, accelerated by Do-hyun's considerable influence, was showing early positive results. A soft knock preceded Ji-ho's entrance. Sir, guests are asking for you. The education minister specifically requested a moment before his speech. And Min-seo? Do-hyun asked, turning from the mirror. She arrived 10 minutes ago. She's greeting the Samsung executives now. Do-hyun nodded, appreciating Ji-ho's precision as always. Min-seo had agreed to attend tonight, to maintain appearances, she'd said during their tense phone conversation. But this would be their first public appearance together since she'd learned about Ji-yoon and the twins. The car is confirmed for midnight? Do-hyun confirmed, checking his watch. Yes, sir. To take you directly to the hospital as requested. Do-hyun had insisted on maintaining his nightly visits to Ji-yoon, even on gala night. The nurses had bent visiting hour rules at his request, allowing him late access to sit with her while she slept, sometimes for hours. "Thank you, Jiho. That will be all for tonight." His assistant hesitated at the door. "Sir, if I may?" "The board is beginning to ask questions about your frequent absences, the hospital visits." "Let them ask," Do-hyun said firmly. "Some matters transcend business." Jiho nodded, a flicker of respect crossing his usually impassive face before he withdrew. The ballroom's noise enveloped Do-hyun as he entered. Immediately, familiar faces turned toward him. Politicians, business associates, celebrities attached to the foundation's educational initiatives. He moved through the crowd with practiced ease, shaking hands, exchanging pleasantries, discussing the foundation's achievements, all while scanning the room for Minasio. He spotted her across the ballroom, resplendent in a midnight blue gown that complemented her slender figure. Even from a distance, he could see the perfect smile she maintained as she chatted with a group of donors. A smile that didn't reach her eyes. Their gazes met briefly across the crowded room. Minasio's smile faltered for just a moment before she recovered, excusing herself from her conversation to make her way toward him. "You look beautiful," Do-hyun said as she approached, genuine admiration in his voice. "Thank you," she replied with cool politeness. "The education minister is looking for you. Something about the new scholarship program." "Minasio," he began, lowering his voice. "Can we talk properly after the gala?" Before she could answer, they were interrupted by Chairman Park of the National Education Committee, his booming voice carrying over the orchestra. "Do-hyun, there you are. And the lovely Minasio, the power couple of Seoul philanthropy." Minasio's smile became fixed as she accepted the chairman's effusive greeting. "Chairman Park, how wonderful to see you. The foundation is so appreciative of your continued support." "Nonsense, it's I who should be thanking you both. The Kim Foundation's work with underprivileged students is transforming lives." Do-hyun engaged in the expected pleasantries while watching Minasio from the corner of his eye. 9 years of marriage had attuned him to her every expression, every subtle shift of posture. Tonight, beneath her perfect composure, he recognized the tension in her shoulders, the careful distance she maintained between them. The evening progressed according to plan. Dinner at precisely 8, speeches at 9, awards presented at 9:30. Do-hyun delivered his remarks with his usual confidence, praising the foundation's accomplishments and announcing next year's expanded scholarship program. The audience applauded enthusiastically, none of them aware of how dramatically their host's personal life had unraveled in recent days. At 10:45, as the orchestra began playing for dancing, Do-hyun's phone vibrated in his pocket. Stepping discreetly into the corridor, he checked the message from Sujin. "Mom asking for you. Fever spiked. Doctor's not concerned, but she's restless." His heart rate accelerated immediately. He typed a quick response, "On my way." Returning to the ballroom, he searched for Minasio, finding her in conversation with the university president and his wife. He approached with an apologetic smile. "Excuse me," he said smoothly. "Minasio, may I speak with you for a moment?" She followed him to a quiet alcove near the terrace doors, her expression guarded. "What is it?" "I need to leave," he said without preamble. "June isn't well. The twins just messaged me." Something flickered across Minasio's face. Not anger, as he might have expected, but something more complex. "Go," she said after a moment. "I'll handle things here." Do-hyun hesitated, surprised by her response. "Are you sure?" "Do-hyun," Minasio said, her voice softening slightly. "Whatever is happening between us, I wouldn't keep you from someone who needs you, especially now." He reached for her hand instinctively. "Thank you." She allowed the brief contact before withdrawing her fingers from his. "We still need to talk. Tomorrow. Come to Haejin's apartment in the morning." He nodded, grateful for the opening. "I'll be there." Jiho had the car waiting at the hotel's side entrance, allowing Do-hyun to exit without drawing attention. As they sped through Seoul's nighttime streets toward the hospital, he loosened his bow tie and stared out at the passing city lights. When he reached room 418, he found Jiun awake, propped against pillows, her face flushed with fever. Sumin sat dozing in the corner chair, while Sujin gently pressed a cool cloth to her mother's forehead. "You came?" June said weakly as he entered, her eyes brightening despite her obvious discomfort. "Of course I came," he replied, moving quickly to her bedside. "What happened?" "Nothing serious," Sujin assured him. "The doctors say fever spikes are normal with this treatment protocol. But she was asking for you. I didn't want to interrupt your gala," Jiun murmured, attempting to sit up straighter. Do-hyun gently placed his hand over hers. "You're more important than any gala." The simple statement hung in the air between them, weighted with decades of history and recent revelations. "You're still in your tuxedo," Jiun observed with a small smile. "Very debonair, just like that first charity auction where we met. Remember, the University Art Department fundraiser," Do-hyun recalled, surprised by how vividly the memory returned. "You were selling one of your paintings, and you outbid everyone, even though you told me later you didn't even like abstract expressionism." Despite her fever, Jiun's eyes sparkled with the memory. Do-hyun found himself smiling in response, aware of Sujin watching their exchange with undisguised interest. "I'll get some more ice," Sujin said after a moment, discreetly leaving them alone. Sumin still sleeping soundly in the corner. "How are you really feeling?" Do-hyun asked when they were effectively alone. Jiun's smile faded. "Truthfully? Scared," she admitted. "The treatment is brutal. Some days I wonder if it's worth it." "It is," he insisted, tightening his grip on her hand. "The latest results show the tumor markers decreasing. You just need to hold on." She studied his face in the dim light of the hospital room. "You look tired, Do-hyun. Are you sleeping?" The question, her concern for his welfare despite her own grave situation, was so characteristic of Jiun that Do-hyun felt a surge of emotion he couldn't fully identify. "I'm fine," he assured her. "Just busy with everything." "Min SEO?" Jiun said softly. Not a question. Do-hyun nodded, seeing no point in denial. "She's staying with her sister while we figure things out." "I'm sorry," Jiun said, genuine regret in her voice. "That's my fault. The twins should never have gone to your office." "No," Do-hyun said firmly. "They did exactly what they should have done, and none of this is your fault. If anything—" He broke off, struggling with the weight of his own culpability. "If anything, it's yours?" Jiun finished for him, a hint of her old directness emerging despite her weakness. "That's not completely true either. We were both young. We both made choices. But my choice hurt you," Do-hyun said quietly. "Left you alone with the twins." "Yes," Jiun acknowledged. "It did. But it also freed me to raise them my way, without compromise." A soft smile touched her lips. "And they're extraordinary, aren't they?" "They are," Do-hyun agreed, glancing at his sleeping son. "Remarkable. You did an incredible job with them." "They have your determination," Jiun observed. "Especially Sumin. So stubborn. So driven. And Sujin has your insight. Your compassion." They fell silent, both contemplating the children who connected them across the years of separation. "What will you do?" Jiun asked after a moment. "About Min SEO? About the twins?" The question had consumed Do-hyun for days, keeping him awake in the empty silence of his house. "I don't know yet," he admitted. "I'm meeting with Min SEO tomorrow. As for the twins, I want to be part of their lives, if they'll allow it." "And if they don't?" Jiun's question was gentle but pointed. "Then I'll respect their decision," Do-hyun said, though the prospect pained him. "But I'll never stop trying to earn their trust." Jiun nodded, seemingly satisfied with his answer. Her eyelids grew heavy, the combination of medication and fever sapping her limited energy. "You should rest," Do-hyun said, noticing her struggle to stay awake. "Will you stay?" she asked, her voice already drifting. "Just for a while?" "I'll be here," he promised. As Jiun slipped into sleep, Do-hyun maintained his gentle hold on her hand, watching the rise and fall of her chest. Eventually, Soo-jin returned, pausing in the doorway at the sight of her father keeping vigil beside her mother. "You don't have to stay all night," she said quietly, placing the ice bucket on the bedside table. "I can call if anything changes." "I want to stay," Do-hyun replied simply. Soo-jin settled into the chair opposite, studying him across her mother's sleeping form. "You still care for her," she observed. It wasn't a question, but Do-hyun answered anyway. "June was my first love. That doesn't just disappear even after 19 years. And your wife? That's complicated," Do-hyun admitted. "Min-seo and I built something valuable together. Partnership, foundation, public life. I respect her enormously. But it's not the same," Soo-jin suggested perceptively. Do-hyun met his daughter's gaze across the hospital bed. "No," he acknowledged softly. "It's not the same." The admission, one he had rarely allowed himself to consider, let alone voice aloud, hung in the quiet hospital room, accompanied only by the steady beeping of monitors and Soo-min's gentle breathing from the corner chair. "What happens now?" Soo-jin asked, echoing her mother's earlier question. Do-hyun looked down at Ji-yoon's sleeping face, then at his daughter's questioning eyes, then toward his slumbering son. His family, unknown to him just weeks ago, now the center of his emotional universe. "Now," he said with quiet certainty, "we fight for your mother's recovery. Everything else comes after that." Morning found Do-hyun still in the hospital room, his tuxedo jacket draped over a chair, bow tie loosened around his neck. He woke to find both twins gone, presumably to get breakfast, and Ji-yoon watching him from her bed, her fever broken, eyes clear. "You stayed all night," she said, her voice stronger than the previous evening. "I promised I would," he replied simply, checking his watch. Nearly 8. His meeting with Min-seo was at 9. Ji-yoon seemed to read his thoughts. "You have somewhere to be." "It can wait," he began, but she shook her head. "Go, Do-hyun. Handle what needs handling. The twins will be back soon." He rose, retrieving his jacket from the chair. "I'll return this afternoon. The oncologist is coming at 2, correct?" Ji-yoon nodded. "Do-hyun," she called as he reached the door. "Thank you for everything you're doing." He paused, struck by the inadequacy of any response. "I should have been there all along," he said finally before slipping out into the corridor. An hour later, freshly showered and changed into a casual sweater and slacks, Do-hyun stood outside Min-seo's sister's apartment in Gangnam. He had declined Ji-ho's offer to drive him, preferring to walk the few blocks from home, using the time to organize his thoughts. Hae-jin opened the door, her usual warm smile replaced by cautious politeness. "She's in the living room," she said, stepping aside to let him enter. "I'll give you privacy." Min-seo sat by the window overlooking the Han River, a cup of tea cooling before her. She had always been beautiful, classically elegant, perfectly composed. But today she looked vulnerable in a way Do-hyun rarely saw, dressed simply in a cashmere sweater and jeans, her hair pulled back without her usual precision. "Thank you for seeing me," he said, remaining standing until she gestured to the chair opposite. "How is she?" Min-seo asked directly, surprising him with the question. "Better this morning," he answered honestly. "The treatment is difficult, but there are promising signs." Min-seo nodded, turning her teacup slowly between her fingers. "And the children, your children, how are they handling it?" "With remarkable strength," Do-hyun said. "They've been caring for her alone for months. They're exhausted but determined." Another nod, another careful rotation of the teacup. "They seem like exceptional young people." "They are." Silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken thoughts. "I've had a week to think," Min-seo said finally, her voice measured. "About us. About what happens next." Do-hyun leaned forward slightly. "Min-seo, I never meant to hurt you. I should have told you about Ji-yoon years ago. But you didn't know about the children," she finished for him. "I understand that part." What I'm struggling with is why you never mentioned her at all. Someone you clearly loved deeply. The question cut to the heart of their marriage, to the careful compartmentalization that had allowed Do-hyun to build a life with Min Seo while keeping his past sealed away. I thought it was irrelevant to our future, he admitted. Ji-yoon represented a chapter one had decided to close. Our marriage, yours and mine, was about building something new. Something substantial. Something substantial, Min Seo repeated softly. Yes, we did build something substantial, didn't we? Company. A foundation. A reputation. She looked up, meeting his eyes directly. But not a family. Not in the way you now have with them. Do-hyun flinched at the accuracy of her assessment. Min Seo. No, let me finish, she said calmly. I'm not angry anymore, Do-hyun. I'm sad. Sad that for 9 years I believed we wanted the same things, when clearly we didn't. That's not fair, he protested. I've been committed to our marriage, to the life we built together. Yes, you have, she acknowledged. You've been the perfect husband in every observable way. Generous, supportive, reliable. She paused, setting down her teacup with deliberate care. But I've seen how you look at her, even sick even after all these years. I saw it immediately when I walked into your office that day and found you with the twins. Do-hyun wanted to deny it but found he couldn't. Not to Min Seo, who had always been perceptive beyond most people's capacity. What do you want, Min Seo? He asked instead. Recognizing that the decision ultimately lay with her, she looked out at the river for a long moment before answering. I want what I've always wanted. A true partnership. Family. Children. She turned back to him, her expression resolute. And I think I deserve the chance to find that with someone who wants those things as deeply as I do. The implication was clear, yet still Do-hyun needed to hear it explicitly. Are you asking for a divorce? I think it's best, she said with quiet dignity. For both of us. Despite having half expected this outcome, the finality of her words struck Do-hyun with unexpected force. 9 years of shared life. 9 years of building something that had, in its own way, mattered deeply to him. I never wanted to fail you, he said finally. You haven't failed me, Min Seo replied, genuine kindness in her voice. We've both simply recognized the truth before wasting more years pretending. The foundation, he began, practical considerations immediately surfacing. Will continue exactly as it is, she assured him. My work with the educational initiatives is important to me. I won't abandon it because our personal relationship is changing. Do-hyun nodded, impressed yet again by her composure, her thoughtfulness even in the midst of personal pain. I'll have the lawyers draw up settlement terms that reflect your contributions to Kim Holdings, he said. You deserve substantial recognition for your role in the company's growth. I don't want your money, Do-hyun, Min Seo said firmly. I have my family's resources. What I want is a clean, dignified separation with minimal public drama. Of course, he agreed immediately. Whatever you wish. Another silence fell between them, this one somehow lighter. The weight of pretense finally lifted from their interaction. May I ask you something? Min Seo said eventually. About Ji-yoon? Anything. Do you intend to resume your relationship with her? If she recovers. The question caught Do-hyun off guard, not because he hadn't considered it, but because he had avoided examining his feelings too closely, focusing instead on Ji-yoon's treatment and getting to know the twins. I don't know, he answered truthfully. Right now, my only concern is helping her beat this illness. For her sake, for the twins. What happens afterward? He shook his head slightly. That's too far ahead to consider. Min Seo studied him intently, as if searching for something in his expression. Whatever she found seemed to satisfy her. I hope she recovers, she said with surprising sincerity. For everyone's sake. Thank you, Do-hyun replied, touched by her generosity in the midst of their own difficult conversation. As he left the apartment 30 minutes later, having discussed the practical details of their separation with characteristic efficiency, Do-hyun felt a strange mixture of sorrow and relief. An important chapter of his life was ending, a chapter that had brought him stability, respectability, and genuine partnership. Yet as he walked through the crisp autumn morning toward Seoul National University Hospital, another feeling gradually emerged, one he hadn't expected: freedom. Freedom to embrace the complications he had spent 2 decades avoiding. Freedom to know his children without reservation. Freedom to face whatever future awaited him with Ji-yoon, if she recovered. Without her, if the unthinkable happened. Outside Ji-yoon's room, he paused at the sound of music drifting through the partially open door. A haunting piano melody, delicate yet complex. He recognized Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, a piece he remembered Ji-yoon playing during their university days on the upright piano in her tiny apartment. He nudged the door open silently to find Soo-min seated on a folding chair, fingers dancing across the keys of a digital keyboard that hadn't been there yesterday. Ji-yoon watched from her bed, eyes closed in peaceful appreciation, while Soo-jin arranged fresh flowers by the window. None of them noticed Do-hyun immediately, allowing him a rare moment to observe his newfound family unguarded. Soo-min played with remarkable sensitivity. His expression transformed from its usual defensive wariness into something approaching serenity. Ji-yoon's face, though still bearing the marks of illness, had regained some of its former animation, her head swaying slightly with the music's rhythm. And Soo-jin, watching her brother and mother with obvious affection, revealed a tenderness that contrasted with her typical practical efficiency. The piece concluded with a gentle diminuendo, the final notes hanging in the air like a question. When Soo-min looked up, he was the first to notice Do-hyun standing in the doorway. "How long have you been there?" he asked, his guard visibly reinstating itself. "Not long," Do-hyun replied softly. "That was beautiful." Ji-yoon opened her eyes, her smile widening at the sight of him. "Do-hyun, I didn't expect you back so soon." He entered the room fully, setting down the small package he carried. "I wanted to be here for the oncologist's visit." He gestured toward the keyboard. "Where did this come from?" "It arrived this morning," Soo-jin explained. "The nurses said you arranged it." Do-hyun nodded, gratified that Ji-ho had executed his request so promptly. "I remembered how important music was in your household," he said, addressing Ji-yoon directly. Soo-jin mentioned that Soo-min was struggling without being able to practice. Soo-min ran his fingers across the keys silently, a wordless acknowledgement. "It's a good instrument," he conceded after a moment. "Not quite a Steinway, but thoughtful." Coming from Soo-min, Do-hyun recognized this as significant progress. "I'm glad you approve. How did your meeting go?" Ji-yoon asked, her intuition as sharp as ever despite her condition. Do-hyun hesitated, aware of the twins' attentive gazes. "It went as expected. Min Seo and I have agreed to separate. She's filing for divorce next week." Ji-yoon's expression softened with concern. "I'm sorry, Do-hyun." "Don't be," he replied, surprised by how genuinely he meant it. "It was the right decision. For both of us." Soo-jin and Soo-min exchanged a quick, loaded glance that Do-hyun couldn't quite interpret. Before he could dwell on it, the door opened again, revealing Dr. Kim, the oncologist, accompanied by 2 residents. "Quite the gathering today," Dr. Kim observed pleasantly, nodding a greeting to the room at large before focusing on Ji-yoon. "How are you feeling after last night's fever spike?" "Better," Ji-yoon replied. "Stronger." "Excellent," the doctor said, reviewing the chart in his hands. "I have your latest results here. Shall we discuss them privately, or?" He glanced questioningly at Do-hyun and the twins. "They can stay," Ji-yoon said firmly. "Whatever you have to tell me, I want them to hear it directly." Dr. Kim nodded and proceeded to detail the latest test results with clinical precision. Do-hyun listened with intense concentration, mentally translating the medical jargon into practical implications. The experimental treatment was working better than expected. Tumor markers down 30%. Liver function improving. Blood counts stabilizing. "So what does this mean exactly?" Soo-min interrupted impatiently. "Is she getting better or not?" Dr. Kim smiled, understanding the anxiety behind the question. It means, young man, that your mother is responding exceptionally well to the treatment protocol. I wouldn't use the word remission yet. It's too soon. But these results are very encouraging. June's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes suddenly bright with tears. Sujin moved immediately to sit beside her mother, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. How much longer will she need treatment? Do-hyun asked, his voice steadier than he felt. At least 3 more cycles, Dr. Kim replied. But if these results continue, we might consider releasing Ms. Park to outpatient care within 2 weeks. After the doctor departed, a stunned silence fell over the room. It was Ji-yoon who broke it, her laughter bubbling up unexpectedly. A sound of pure, unrestrained joy that Do-hyun realized he had missed for 19 years without fully understanding what was missing. Did you hear that? She asked, beaming at her children. Outpatient care. I might get to go home. The twins' reactions differed characteristically. Sujin openly wiping tears while maintaining a practical demeanor. Sumin pacing the room with barely contained emotion, his fingers tapping complex rhythms against his thigh. We should celebrate, Do-hyun suggested, caught up in their collective relief. Something small, but special. Yes, Ji-yoon agreed enthusiastically. I'm so tired of hospital food. Could we possibly have something delivered? Something delicious. What would you like? Do-hyun asked, already reaching for his phone. Ji-yoon's eyes sparkled with sudden mischief. Remember that noodle place near the university? With the spicy seafood jampong that you said was too hot but kept eating anyway? The memory surfaced immediately. Ji-yoon laughing as he struggled through the fiery broth, too proud to admit defeat, his eyes watering while she teased him mercilessly. Golden Dragon? He recalled, surprised at his own perfect recollection of the name. It's still there. It is, Sujin confirmed. Mom makes us take her there whenever she has a good day. Says the jampong is medicinal. It is, Ji-yoon insisted with playful indignation. Clears the sinuses, gets the blood moving, makes normal people cry and begs for mercy. Sumin finished, a rare smile touching his lips. Do-hyun found himself laughing, truly laughing, for what felt like the first time in months. Golden Dragon it is, then, and I won't embarrass myself this time. We'll see, Ji-yoon challenged, her eyes alight with the spark that had first drawn him to her all those years ago. An hour later, the small hospital room had transformed into an impromptu celebration. Containers of jampong, jjajangmyeon, and dumplings covered the overbed table, their spicy aromas overwhelming the typical antiseptic hospital smell. Ji-yoon sat propped against her pillows, a paper napkin tucked into her hospital gown like a bib, slurping noodles with obvious delight. Still too spicy? She teased Do-hyun, who was indeed struggling with the heat level but determined not to show it. Not at all, he lied smoothly, reaching for his water glass. Delicious, Sujin laughed. Your face is turning red. Just admit defeat. Never, Do-hyun declared, taking another deliberate bite and forcing himself not to react as fire spread through his mouth. A Kim doesn't surrender. So stubborn, Ji-yoon said fondly. Some things really never change. The casual intimacy of her observation, the shared history it implied, created a moment of connection that transcended their years apart. Do-hyun found himself staring at her, at the lively animation in her face, the graceful movement of her hands as she gestured, the way her short hair curled slightly at her temples, and feeling a resurgence of emotions he had buried long ago. Sumin, ever observant, caught the look and cleared his throat pointedly. Mom, you should take it easy. Don't overdo it. Ji-yoon rolled her eyes good-naturedly. I'm celebrating, not running a marathon. Let me enjoy this moment. Speaking of moments to enjoy, Sujin interjected, I forgot to tell you. Professor Jung called this morning about your exhibition. Ji-yoon's chopsticks paused midair. What did he say? Is it cancelled? Just postponed, Sujin assured her. Until spring. He said the gallery is committed to showing your work whenever you're ready. Do-hyun looked between them, curious. Exhibition? Mom was supposed to have a solo show at the Sejong Center next month, Sujin explained. Her first major exhibition in years. The diagnosis came right after she'd finished the final pieces. I didn't know you were still painting, Do-hyun said to Jiyoon, surprised and somewhat ashamed at how little he knew of her life. Not always consistently, she admitted. Teaching took priority when the twins were young. But the last few years I've been more focused on my own work again. She's being modest, Sumin said unexpectedly. Her paintings sell for serious money now. Collectors from Tokyo to New York. She just doesn't like to talk about it. Do-hyun absorbed this information with a mixture of pride and regret. Pride in Jiyoon's evident success. Regret for having missed witnessing her artistic evolution. I'd like to see your work, he said simply. Something vulnerable flickered across Jiyoon's face. Would you? Really? Of course. There are a few pieces at the house, Sujin offered. Things she was still working on before. She trailed off, gesturing vaguely at the hospital room. An idea formed in Do-hyun's mind, spontaneous and perhaps impulsive, but suddenly important. When you're released, when you can go home, would you consider letting me see your studio? See where you work? Jiyoon studied him for a long moment, as if weighing something significant. I'd like that, she finally said. Though I warn you, it's chaotic. Nothing like your orderly corporate world. I could use a little chaos, Do-hyun replied with unexpected honesty. Their eyes held briefly before Sumin stood abruptly. I need some air, he announced, dropping his napkin beside his half-eaten meal. And I should practice for my recital next week. Sumin, Jiyoon began, but he was already heading for the door. I'll just be in the garden, he said over his shoulder. Back soon. As the door closed behind him, Jiyoon sighed. He's struggling with all of this, she explained to Do-hyun. More than he lets on. I understand, Do-hyun said quietly. It's a lot to process. I'll go talk to him, Sujin offered, rising. Make sure he's okay. Left alone, Do-hyun and Jiyoon fell into a moment of awkward silence, the first since his arrival. He'll come around, Jiyoon finally said. He's just protective. Of you. Yes, and of our life together, I think. The three of us against the world. That's been his reality since he was born. Now everything's changing. Do-hyun nodded, understanding completely. I don't want to disrupt their lives, Jiyoon. Or yours. I just want to be present. If you'll all have me. Jiyoon set aside her food, her expression turning serious. Do-hyun, can I ask you something? Something direct. Anything. Why now? If the twins hadn't come to your office that day, would you ever have looked for me? For them. The question pierced through the pleasant atmosphere, demanding honesty. Do-hyun considered deflecting but found he couldn't. Not with Jiyoon looking at him with those perceptive eyes that had always seen through his careful facades. No, he admitted, the single syllable carrying the weight of 19 years of deliberate avoidance. I wouldn't have. Jiyoon nodded slowly, absorbing his answer without visible judgment. Why not? Because I was a coward, he said simply. Because facing you meant facing the worst decision of my life. Because I convinced myself that leaving was the right thing for both of us, and looking back would only bring pain. And now I realize what that cowardice cost me. Cost us all. He took a deep breath. Jiyoon, I need to ask you something too. Something I should have asked 19 years ago. Her expression softened with curiosity. What is it? Why didn't you tell me you were pregnant before I left for New York? Would it have changed anything if I had known? The question hung between them, heavy with potential alternate histories, paths not taken. Jiyoon folded her hands carefully in her lap. I didn't know until after you'd gone, she said quietly. By the time I found out, you were already established at Columbia, already pursuing the path your father had set for you. And she paused, seeming to search for the right words. I was angry, Do-hyun. Hurt. You had made your choice so clearly. The corporate heir returning to his destined role. I would have come back, Do-hyun insisted, though even as he said it, He wondered if it was true, if his younger self would have abandoned his father's expectations, the trajectory that had been planned for him since childhood. "Would you?" June asked gently. "Really? Or would you have sent money, made arrangements from a distance, visited? Occasionally with guilty gifts and promises to stay in touch." The scenario she painted was so plausible, so aligned with what he knew of himself at 23, that Do-hyun couldn't honestly refute it. "I don't know," he acknowledged. "I want to believe I would have done the right thing." "The right thing," June repeated thoughtfully. "That's always been your North Star, hasn't it? But whose definition of right were you following? Your father's? Society's? Your own?" The question struck at something fundamental. Do-hyun had spent his entire adult life making decisions based on what appeared correct, proper, expected, building Kim Holdings into an international powerhouse, marrying an appropriate partner, maintaining an impeccable reputation. But sitting here in this hospital room, those achievements suddenly seemed hollow compared to what he had missed. Watching his children grow, sharing Ji-yoon's artistic journey, experiencing the messy, beautiful reality of family life. "I don't know anymore," he admitted, the uncertainty both frightening and oddly liberating. "I thought I did. Now I'm not sure I ever knew." Ji-yoon reached for his hand, her touch gentle yet grounding. "It's not too late to figure it out," she said softly. "Even for a stubborn Kim." Their fingers intertwined naturally, the contact bridging years of separation. Do-hyun felt something shift within him, a calcified fragment of his heart cracking open, exposing tender places he had protected for too long. "I've missed you," he said, the words emerging unbidden. "Not just since finding you again, all these years, even when I pretended not to." Ji-yoon's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "I missed you too," she whispered, "even when I was furious with you, even when I told myself I was better off without you." A knock at the door interrupted the moment, causing them to separate their hands hastily as a nurse entered to check Ji-yoon's vital signs. "Blood pressure excellent today," the nurse commented cheerfully, recording the reading. "Whatever you're doing, keep it up." After she left, the spell was broken. The intensity of their conversation diffused. Ji-yoon looked suddenly tired, the brief celebration taking its toll on her still recovering body. "You should rest," Do-hyun said, noticing her fatigue. "Will you come back tomorrow?" she asked, settling back against her pillows. "Try to keep me away," he replied with a smile that felt more genuine than any he had given in years. As he gathered the remains of their impromptu feast, Do-hyun sensed Ji-yoon watching him, a question forming in her eyes. "What is it?" he prompted gently. "What happens now, Do-hyun? With Minaseo leaving, with the twins, with..." She gestured vaguely between them. "This, whatever this is becoming." It was the question he had been asking himself since walking out of Minaseo's sister's apartment that morning. A question with no simple answer. "Now," he said carefully, "you focus on getting well. That's the priority. Everything else we'll figure out together. One day at a time." It wasn't a complete answer, but it was an honest one. For now, it would have to be enough. He found the twins in the hospital garden, Soo-jin seated on a bench watching as Soo-min paced restlessly along the stone path. They fell silent as he approached, their expressions guarded. "Your mother's resting," he told them. "The celebration tired her out." Soo-jin nodded. "We'll go back up in a few minutes." An awkward silence followed, broken eventually by Soo-min's direct question. "So you're getting divorced?" "Soo-min," Soo-jin chided, shooting her brother a warning look. "It's all right," Do-hyun assured her. "Yes, Minaseo and I are separating. It was a mutual decision." "Because of us?" Soo-min pressed, his tone challenging. "Because of Mom?" Do-hyun considered his answer carefully. "It's not that simple," he said finally. "Minaseo and I had foundational differences that became impossible to ignore once you both came into my life. But those differences were always there." "What happens when Mom gets better?" Soo-jin asked, her practical nature asserting itself. "You heard the doctor. She could be released soon. That depends partly on what you all want." Do-hyun replied honestly. I'd like to be part of your lives, all of you, but I won't force my presence where it isn't welcomed. Sumin scoffed slightly. As if we could stop you. You're Do-hyun Kim. You get what you want. The bitterness in his son's voice stung. But Do-hyun recognized the fear beneath it. Fear of change, of disappointment, of potential abandonment. Not always, he said quietly. I wanted to know my children as they grew up. I wanted to see your first steps, hear your first words, attend your school performances. I missed all of that, and no amount of success or money can ever recover those moments. His candor seemed to catch Sumin off guard, momentarily softening his defensive posture. Mom's recital is next Friday, Sujin said unexpectedly. At the conservatory. He's playing Rachmaninoff. Do-hyun recognized the offering for what it was. A tentative opening. A chance to witness something significant in his son's life. I'd like to attend, he said simply. If that's all right with Sumin. Both turned to Sumin, who looked torn between his instinctive resistance and something else. Perhaps curiosity, perhaps a reluctant desire for his father's approval. Fine, he said finally with affected indifference. If you want, it starts at 8. It wasn't an enthusiastic invitation, but it was something. A small step toward connection. I'll be there, Do-hyun promised, knowing this was one commitment he could not fail to keep, regardless of what business emergencies might arise. As he left the hospital 30 minutes later, stepping into the golden afternoon light of early autumn, Do-hyun felt a strange sense of possibility opening before him. A future unlike anything he had planned or expected, yet somehow more